So, with Anthem's demos being out of the way, I wanted to go ahead and throw together a quick hands-on impression of each of the Javelins. And that's what I really, really wanted to get done here. And I apologize for how not professional the video is. This is my first video ever for YouTube, and I hope to get better, but bear with me. So we're going to go over some of the things that I experienced in playtime with the different Javelins, different builds and loadouts they had, and give you my impressions of them and what their playstyles feel like. So without wasting any more time, let's go ahead and get into it. The Ranger Javelin is more of a jack-of-all-trades type kind of a Javelin. It has significant damage abilities, but not as high as, say, the Storm. It has some support abilities in the form of its dome shield, and also it's a nice mix in the balance between damage output and survivability. While not as beefy as a Colossus or as squishy as a Storm, it can get into the mix of a firefight, hold its own for a while, and also dish out a pretty decent amount of damage to burn down the enemy. The Javelin, I feel, the Ranger out of all the Javelins, I feel rely more heavily on weapons as opposed to their abilities. The abilities I've messed with the Ranger, the secret grenades, the frag grenades, the different kind of darts and stuff, none of them felt particularly powerful. Particular things like the venom darts are more for damage over time. I typically use them when I'm fighting something that has a shield. That way it halts shield regeneration while I reload or something like that. And it just feels like this is a more weapon-based class. Like, you're going to be relying more on your weapons than you are your actual abilities with the Ranger Javelin. Which for some people that might be a big drawback, because, you want to use cool flashy abilities. And don't get me wrong, their ultimate is very, very Iron Man-ish secret missile dart thing. And I think that's awesome. But as you see here, it does have a drawback. If things are not within a certain range, or they're not in line of sight, they have a tendency to not actually hit anything. So that would be the biggest drawback to the Ranger. But otherwise, it's a really solid balance between the two, or just solid balance between the four, except when, Giant Spider Queen stomps on you like she did there. I don't really think there's much to say for the Interceptor. I mean, it's a very fragile Javelin, but it makes up for it with speed and mobility. It does have some heavy-duty melee attacks. Its ultimate is powerful as hell for clearing out large groups of enemies, as well as dealing significant amount of damage to single targets. I really can't speak too much on it, because in all the time I played both the VIP demo and the public demo, I never really got much in the way of different abilities for the Javelin. Whereas the other three Javelins, I got lots of different abilities to mess with. The biggest one I had to use the most of was the Ghost Strike, where you basically send a hologram of your Javelin out to attack. And that seemed pretty lackluster, I'm not gonna lie. It doesn't seem to do a lot of damage. The range is kind of iffy on it. However, the Cryo Throwing Star and the other Throwing Star you have as your base default gear are pretty nice. They do a decent amount of damage. One thing I will say with the Interceptor is that you should be using your mobility to the fullest. Like you see right here, I'm running around collecting the orbs while everybody's dealing with the enemies to try to push the objective, clear the wave, and get that done. You really aren't going to go toe-to-toe with a lot of enemies because you just don't have the survivability. And one ability they do have that's nice is a rally cry, which removes movement impairing and stuff, its stats, effects, burning, being webbed or frozen. That is definitely helpful because it doesn't just work for you, it works for your entire squad in the area. So it's a good way to kind of cancel out a bad debuff that's going on. So that's a nice group utility that it has. But unfortunately, I can't provide any more information about the Javelin just because they really didn't give me... I didn't have a lot of access to it. So hopefully more in the final release. Colossus Javelin is the tank of the Javelins. It's the only one that has an actual taunt ability, which draws enemy aggro to it, and it has a lot of defense. It, however, does not have a shield. All it has is its armor. Armor health bar. It does not have a shield health bar, and to compensate for that, or make up for that, sorry, they have an actual shield they can pull out to deflect shots and stuff. The thing with the Colossus is your job is to basically just to take the enemy hits, and you can dish out a fair amount of damage. You have a lot of AoE type abilities, a lot of heavy hitting abilities, and their ultimate, which is basically the ability to fire off 3 nukes, is quite good at clearing out large groups. One thing with the shield that I did notice and I like is if you sprint with the shield out, you can actually charge through enemies and damage them, which is pretty cool. Nice little feature there that they had a nice little, way for the shield to be something more than just defensive. I like how they add that in. The Colossus is going to rely more heavily on their weapons than their abilities, just for the simple fact their abilities seem to take a little bit longer to cool down than other classes. But if you want to be an effective Colossus, you want to be like the tank of the group, tank of the squad, you're going to be wanting to make the most out of your battle cry, which is your taunt. That way enemies stay focused on you, so the rest of your squad can safely deal with the enemies without worrying about being in line of fire, so to speak. The one thing that is a drawback for me personally, and what might not make me play Colossus as much, is the fact that you really don't have that overshield, and I understand why they did it, but at the same time, I feel like it makes the class a little bit more difficult to play than it needs to be, because harder level difficulties, that shield you pull up, you get shredded real fast. The Storm is the destructive powerhouse of all the Javelins. It has the ability to dish out a massive amount of damage with its elemental attacks. Its ultimate is perfect for creating combo damage, which amplifies the damage you do. But this all comes at a drawback, and that, quite simply, is the Storm is literally the mage class of Anthem. They're a glass cannon. They can do a lot of damage, they can't take a hit worth a damn. And that's the biggest drawback to it, and what I think a lot of people are going to have a hard time adjusting to, because a lot of people that I talk to, they have this mentality, this is like Destiny, and, Warlocks they'll equate Storm to Warlocks, and Warlocks have self-sustaining abilities and whatnot. The Storm really doesn't have that. They do have some abilities available to them to augment their powers, but they don't really have the sustainability to keep themselves standing for in a protracted fight without support. But that doesn't really mean it's a huge drawback, especially when you're considering, like, if it's, as you see on the screen right now, the Storm can kill things fast and just murder everything on screen. And they can do it so quickly that most fights are over before they begin. The one thing I will say about Storm from my time playing it is, again, that whole glass cannon thing. It is an adjustment compared to the other Javelins, because they can take a little bit more of a beating, and also they have some ways of keeping themselves safe. I haven't really messed with the quickening field or dome shield they could put up. I'm more familiar with the wall barrier, and against ranged attacks, it's good, but when you're dealing with creatures like these scorpion spider things that just walk through it, it doesn't really provide you much protection against them. Also with Storm, you really shouldn't be relying too heavily on your weapons. Yes, your weapons allow you to dish out damage while your abilities are on cooldown, but depending on what abilities you have, you should be good. Also, the one thing I want to point out with Storm is you want to have a mix of triggers and primers and detonators. Primers basically are abilities that set up a combo. Detonators are what's trigger the combo. And those are the key to what makes the Storm so effective. If you don't have those, and you just have a bunch of primers, you're going to be lacking a lot in that department, and especially in the damage area.